Hello, everyone. I'm Samantha Bossart, the Executive Director of the Saratoga Springs Preservation Foundation, and I just want to say hello and welcome everyone to tonight's program, and thank you for joining us. Perhaps this will be a much needed welcome distraction to today's world events. So I'm glad you're joining us. And I just want to share just a bit about the foundation, since some of you may be new to us. The Saratoga Springs Preservation Foundation was established in 1977 to promote the preservation and enhancement of the architectural and cultural landscaped heritage of Saratoga Springs. We do this through educational programs such as tonight's program. We also do walking tours. We provide building property owners with technical assistance. We advocate for best preservation practices within the city of Saratoga Springs by commenting on exterior changes, new construction, like the proposed project at 269 North Broadway, which will be, we believe, will be reviewed on Thursday, March 10th. The agenda for that meeting hasn't officially been released, but that is our anticipation. We also undertake restoration projects like the Spirit of Life and Spencer Trask Memorial in Congress Park, helping the First Baptist Church restore their most endangered stained glass windows, and our current rehabilitation project at 65 Phyla Street, the building on your left, the white one, which we have purchased in May. Both of those buildings that you see at 65 and 69 Phyla were threatened with demolition after being long neglected. And we acquired 65 Phyla in May, and we are in the process of going to stabilize it, do environmental remediation, and do an exterior restoration. We are pleased to say that we recently went through the Design Review Commission process, and we received unanimous approval for our proposed plans, which is to restore the building back to its original appearance. With that said, I think one aspect of historic preservation that I find is important is telling the full story of a community beyond just the rich and the well-known citizens, but everyone who left a mark. And although Solomon Northup's story is one of the more well-known ones, we're happy to take a deeper dive into his history as part of Black History Month. Thank you to everyone who made a donation to this program, not only to support preservation, but to also support Cliff and his recovery efforts from the historic building fire in Greenwich, which unfortunately destroyed his studio. Many of you gave an additional amount, and some of you gave a lot more. So we're very grateful for that support. And in particular, we were not certain when we planned this program that, well, we were very much looking forward to this program, and then news hit of the fire. And quite honestly, we were not quite sure Cliff would want to, you know, in the midst of losing his studio, would want to take on this presentation. However, I was told, and clearly he's a glass half full person, which is not me. And he thought it would be something that he wanted to do, and we're grateful that he wanted to do it. I want to remind you that we are a membership-based organization, and so your support is appreciated. Nicole Babby, our Membership and Programs Director, or Jackie Bungie, Events and Programs Coordinator, will include a link for membership for our membership page in the chat box. So if you're not already a member, I encourage you to become one. You'll get updates on our advocacy efforts, as well as upcoming events like our Historic Homes Tour, which is scheduled for May 14th, and our porch party that will be at the reading rooms, which many of you guys may have seen at the corner of Union and Nelson Avenue, but I've always wondered what goes on at the reading room. We're going to have a great porch party on June 2nd. So I encourage you to join us for that event. It's a special event. So you can also, if you're joining us live, I encourage you to make a donation, a suggested donation. It's not required, but we would appreciate it. It not only benefits us tonight, but benefits Cliff. And so it's like a 2-for-1. But before we carry on with the program, I want to just share some business items before I turn it over to our wonderful presenter. If you're joining us by Zoom and have any questions, you can use the chat feature, which is located at the bottom of your screen. And you can, so you may need to move your mouse or tap your screen to see the chat option. If you're joining us over Facebook, you can do that as well. Nicole will be checking those questions and will moderate the conversation throughout the night. We are very appreciative of Cliff Oliver Mealy for joining us tonight, as I already said. Although he was born and raised in New York City, he's lived his entire adult life in rural upstate New York, where he raised a small family, a few dogs, and chases horses. And well, anybody who loves dogs, you know, has a special place in my heart, because we all know I have Leo. Well, maybe not everybody knows about Leo, but you can learn about Leo if you want. Always appreciative of and fascinated by visual arts. Cliff didn't start out to be a photographer nor a historian. He began his career in photography while serving in the U.S. Navy. Luckily, he acquired staff photographer positions with Upstate Medical Center and later New York State Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, where he discovered not only America's history, but his own. His volunteer work with his local library led him to the story of Solomon Northup. Encouraged by his colleagues at the Bureau of Historic Sites, he then found himself an amateur historian and a reenactor. He was recently appointed to the New York State Parks Commission for the Saratoga Capital Region because of his work in bringing history alive. We are thrilled to have Cliff with us tonight to bring Solomon's story to life. So thank you again for all of you joining us tonight. And wait, I think I hear some music. Do you hear that?
This has been the bane of my existence, this violin. I don't know whether to love it, I love it, or hate it. It hasn't always been good to me. Oh, pardon me for not introducing myself. Solomon Northup. Solomon Northup? You might have heard of me. I used to play around these parts. Yeah, at the big hotels, the Grand Union, especially the United States. Yeah, I played that hotel. My wife worked there too. She was quite the cook. Now, I don't think she was some mammy cook. No, she had many as 14 people working under her. Oh, but yeah, Saratoga has changed. And what is this thing they have me in? Seeing you all in these little boxes. This is quite the thing. I hope you can hear me. They told me to speak into this thing here. Times have, for a while, I thought times were moving so slow, and now they seem to be moving so fast. Yeah, Solomon Northup. You don't know me? Well, I was born in Minerva, in the Adirondacks, around 1807, 1808. We weren't good on dates back then. But it was a strange time in the country too, time of my birth. Now, I was born free, even though it was 1807. It wasn't not long after America having abolished the Atlantic slave trade. Slavery, yeah, I said the word slavery. It's an ugly word, it was an ugly deed, but back then it was almost was almost required. You had to. You had to have slaves. Well, maybe you didn't have to, but everyone did. And everyone was a slave to someone at some time. Slavery is an old and ancient institution. It wasn't invented in America. No, it goes back before the Bible. Ever since one man realized he could defeat another man, there's been slavery. Yeah, it's always been about force too. No, I was born a free man. Now, my father, Mintus, he was a slave to Captain Northup out of Rhode Island. But Captain Northup freed my father, and upon his death, and my father took up farming. Yep, I guess he had enough of the sea, because I've always been around farms. Me and my brother, yep, we were raised in farms. I was always been around that fiddle too. My father insisted on it, fiddle and schooling. New York was very unique, and that it insisted everyone go to school. I mean, everyone, black and white. It was to keep people out of the poorhouse. Education and poverty, well, they're enemies. If you're educated, you're gonna be smart enough to earn some money. And if you're not, well, you're gonna be poor enough to be in the poorhouse, and then the state's gotta support you. But yeah, 1808, 1807, I say, I'm not sure which date it was. I was too young to know my numbers back then. I know them now. Hard time in America. Hard time for Black folks. And I say I wasn't a slave, but I certainly was Black. Was and is. Now, I was saying earlier that slavery is a strange institution. This is a time in the world where everything is made by hand. And you know, as great as you may be, you can only do but so much with just 2 hands. And if you had 4 hands, well, you could double your output. 6 set of hands, you could really go mad. And if you don't have to pay anybody, well, then it's all profit. And this was a new territory. This was new land. This was land that wasn't owned by the king or the queen, wasn't owned by the royals as it was all over Europe. No, that's why all the Europeans came here. Everybody came here but the king. All the land, as far as you can see, free for the taking. And I do mean taking. Because there were some people here. Yeah, Native Americans, Indians, they were here. And actually, when I think of my red brothers, they were the first slaves in America. The first slaves in America were the people of the forest. But you know, they didn't want to be slaves any more than you would, or that I would. No, people of the forest, they just ran away. They knew where to hide. They knew all the good hiding spots. Running away in your own house. In your own house, you know where the good hiding spots are. You know where the knives are. Yeah, well, so did the Native Americans. But America needed some slavery. Yeah, it needed somebody to work the fields, needed somebody to cut down the trees and make fields. Nation building. Yeah, we were into nation building. We had a nation that needed building. Who was going to do it? Wasn't enough people. Wasn't even enough Europeans. No slaves. You don't have to pay them. But as I say, I was a free man. Born free, raised free. Now, just because I was free didn't mean everything was milk and honey. No, it was still kind of rough. But I gotta say, that fiddle kind of made me popular in school. Yeah, it probably saved me from a lot of aggravation that a lot of Black folks had at the time. But that fiddle was also what did me in. You see, I was playing at, I believe it was the United States Hotel. It's the one I tend to play at most. When two gentlemen, and I use that term very loosely, Mr. Brown and Mr. Hamilton, they approached me, told me that they had a circus in New York City and that I could play in their circus and make some of that New York City money. I thought that was a mighty good idea. Yeah, mighty good idea. Go to New York. I have never been to New York City. I don't know how many of you have. I've never been. And I kind of like the idea. And these gentlemen promised some really nice cash. So I said, well, you know, I'm a married man. I got a wife and 3 kids. I just can't get up and go. And they said, well, leave her a note. I said, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll put a note on the kitchen table. Honey, I'm going to New York City for the weekend. Be back in a couple of days. Yeah, it didn't sound too good, but it's all I had going, and she wasn't home to stop me. So I went. I went with Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Brown. And oh, what a trip it was. Yeah, we took the stagecoach, we took a boat, we even took that train. Yeah, trains were coming. Got to New York City, and indeed they had a circus. But I have to tell you, it was the sorriest dog and pony show I had ever seen. I see why they were hiring me and paying me so much money, because they had no kind of entertainment at all. And my music, I think, attracted more folks than any of the acts they had. Well, I played for them and they paid for me. My time was up. I shook their hands, thanked them very, very kindly, and I was about to head home. Mr. Brown said, well, wait a minute, Solomon, you know, we have a bigger interest in Washington, D.C. Would you join us? Washington, D.C. Now, that's quite the distance. Yeah, but the pay is good, and I felt that pay right in my pockets. Their coin was good. One thing I have to say for them, their circus might not have been much, but they were true to their words about their money. I said, Washington, D.C. Yeah, I hadn't been there either. A lot of America I hadn't seen. I'd seen more of Canada than I had of America. Washington, D.C. Well, I don't know. I could post another letter to Anne and tell her that I was going further down and I'd be bringing a heap of load of money home. So again, I agreed. I agreed to go with Mr. Brown and Mr. Hamilton. And again, we took stages, boats, all the way to Washington, D.C. Wow. I remember it as if it were yesterday. In Washington, D.C., we got good food and good drink. Mr. Brown wanted to salute our newfound friendship and business opportunity. And so I took a drink with them. Or maybe it was 2 drinks. Could have been 3. I don't rightly remember. But I do remember being powerfully sick. I got so sick, I couldn't stand up. I got so sick, I didn't know if my eyes were shut or if it was nighttime. Oh, I got sick. And I passed out, fell out, or maybe even fell asleep. But I was unconscious. And I had fits of unconsciousness throughout the night, where I would come to and pass out, come to again. All the time, my stomach was just a churning and flipping. my mouth felt like it was full of cotton. Oh, the pain on my temples, around my eyes. Finally, I said, I just got to take refuge in this darkness. And I drifted off to sleep. A fitful sleep, but a sleep. When I came to, that was just as fitful. I felt weighted down, and weighted down I was. Because when I moved, I began to hear clinking. My arms were heavy, my legs were heavy, even my neck was heavy. Now, I ain't the sharpest knife in the drawer, but it didn't take me long to realize that I was in chains. Chains, like a common criminal. Hello, hello, I shouted into the darkness. Because that's all I could see was pure darkness. I didn't know if it was daytime, nighttime. I knew my eyes were open, but it was as if they were closed. It was dark. How in the world? How did I get in chains? Hello, hello, I shouted. Hello, is there anyone out there? Can somebody hear me? Nothing. Nothing pierced that darkness, not even a sound. Sound of those chains every time I moved. I'm pondering what in the world happened to me. And you start thinking, what did I do? Oh, yeah, I was drinking. That ain't the first time I was drinking. But boy, I had never felt like that before. Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Brown, can somebody hear me? Nothing. I wasn't feeling all that good anyway. So I drifted back off into sleep, unconsciousness. When I came to again, it was still dark. But I'm looking hard, looking through that darkness until I saw a chink, a crack in a door, in a wall, but there was a slight light coming through. A slight light. I thought I saw a shadow in that little bit of light. Hello, hello, I shouted. Hello, can you come save me? And I could make out a figure. Or was it two figures? And sure enough, they opened the door. Because I'd saved. I said, I can't explain what happened to me, but I'm in chains here. And it must be a case of mistaken identity because I was hit. Something hit me. I said, wait a minute. No, I'm Solomon Northup. Oh, I was hit again. I said, you don't seem to understand. I'm a stranger in these parts. Oh, I was hit again. And I could see hanging from the sides of these men were with clubs. Clubs, cat of nine tails. Only time I wasn't hit when I didn't speak. So I didn't say anything. They told me my name was Platt. Platt. I know. Told me my name was Platt. And I was from Georgia. I realized they were treating me like a slave. I tried to protest, but I was hit. I was struck again and again. through that crack, which was now open, I could see our nation's capital. I was in the slave pens of Washington, D.C. And they aimed to sell me south. South where slave had a life expectancy of 7 years. Sell me south. You see, earlier I told you I was born in 1807, maybe 1808. But not long before that, America had abolished the slave trade with Africa. Yeah, no more kidnapping free folks and bringing them to America in bondage. No, states of Virginia and Maryland, even North Carolina became slave breeding states. You see, it was thought that somebody brought up in slavery would know no better. Whereas these Africans that they were bringing here, well, they were rebelling. There were slave rebellions happening everywhere, even in New York City. Slave rebellions in Africans. Now, I didn't realize this at the time, but I have to tell you, in my time away from Saratoga, my time away from here, I've learned a lot about slavery. I became kind of a professor on the subject. As I'm dwelling, what in the world happened to me? How did I get in this situation? Sold into slavery. Slavery was needed in America. They needed them Africans to pick cotton. You see, there's this guy, I'm sure you heard of him, Eli Whitney. Eli Whitney had invented a cotton gin. Now, y'all being New Yorkers, you don't know much about cotton. I didn't know anything about cotton either, till I found myself in a field of it. But cotton's kind of like our milkweed. Actually, it even comes to fruition at the time milkweed does. It's got a hard shell around it like milkweed does. And that fluff that's in milkweed, well, in cotton, it's even denser. And that little shell, well, it's protected by these splintery wooden stems. It's kind of hard to, well, especially if you're a carpenter, a woodworker like myself, and you got these big, thick hands, it's kind of hard to pick cotton without stabbing yourself with those little twigs and branches that protect it. Eli Whitney had invented this machine that combs out the seeds of cotton. Because prior to his invention, prior to that cotton gin, the seeds would have to be picked out by hand. Very time consuming. Cotton, the seeds aren't like a milkweed seed. No, they don't ride on the fluff. But they're about the size of an apple seed and just as hard. But they gotta be combed out. You can't have that in your cotton, because you know with cotton, you can just spin it, make thread. And once you get that thread, you can weave that thread together and make cloth. Eli should have invented a cotton picking machine. No, he invented a cotton gin. So now the production of cotton could be sped up. More hands were needed to pick cotton. It wasn't bringing over any more free Negroes from Africa. No, they had to get the Negroes that were here. I figured that's why I was kidnapped. That's why I fell into the trap that Hamilton and Brown had set for me. Well, they sold me south, sold me all the way to Louisiana. You can't get much further south and still be in America. Nope. How was I going to let Ann know where I was? How was I going to let my wife and kids know where I was? Because you see, in the South, they didn't have school for colored folks. No, black men like me couldn't read and write. I could, but they couldn't. If you could read or write, they'd cut off your fingers, burn out your eyes. I had to keep that knowledge to myself. I did leave it out once. I let it out. I sure did. Almost got myself killed. There was this white man, poorest white man you could ever imagine. So poor, he sold himself into slavery. That's right, a white slave. Sold himself into slavery just so he could get some food. Because you got to realize this is a time where there's no Stewart's on every corner. There's no Hannaford, there's no shopping centers. You had to grow it if you wanted to eat it. You had to grow it and had to save it, had to harvest it. Now, I've done all that because I was a farmer. See, I'm a Yankee. No offense to you Boston Red Sox fans, but Yankees are special people. Yeah, we got 4 seasons in the year, and we got to find work for all those 4 seasons. The winter season, well, winter kills. Those other 3 seasons are to prepare us for the winter. How I found myself in the South is beyond me. But there I was, Louisiana. They tried to make me pick cotton. Now, I'm gonna tell you, I was a slave for 12 years. 12 years before I met Mr. Bass. I could go on and tell you about the horrors of slavery, the horrors that I felt. Man who had no culture in slavery. Man who had I had no one to turn to, no one I could talk to. No one was in my predicament. Oh, I was tempted to write. You say, well, why don't you write a letter? Write a letter home. You know, you could sneak out. No, there's no mailboxes where you can slip a letter in and paper. How are you going to get paper? Got to go to the store and get paper. I could see him now. Boy, what you want with a piece of paper? Y'all can't read or write? What you want with some paper? And it costs money too. I didn't have no money. What a predicament I was in. Well, I did scrounge and find me some paper. Burnt some twigs so I could write on. And I said to this poor white boy who was there picking cotton along with us black folks, I asked him very slyly, I didn't just come up and ask him, if he would do such a thing as post a letter, he could do it. I told him there'd be a reward in it for him once my folks knew about me being here. Well, he said he would. But he didn't. And he told my master that I could read and write. I could see my fingers being cut off. I could see my eyes being burnt out. I don't know what miracle made my master believe me, believe my lie, more than he believed that white man's truth. I told him I couldn't read, I couldn't write, wouldn't know a number if it bit me on the butt. What am I going to do now? Days flew by. You know, there's a book I wrote about my adventures in slavery. Understand there's a movie too. I'll let the two of them tell you about the horrors I faced. I wanna educate you about what led into my slavery. Why it happened to me. And I say, because they banned them Africans from coming in here. Yeah. And they needed slaves to do all that labor. They couldn't pay enough people to do all that kind of labor. No. And can you imagine you pay for labor and nobody else is? How are you going to stay in business like that? Now you think about it. Slave did all your chores. Did all that was required of you to do. You got somebody else to do it. And you don't have to pay them. You don't have to pay them. You can use them any way you want. Give you an idea. A slave was considered worth more than a cow. More than a cow, but less than a horse. We were beasts of burden. Beasts of burden. My owner, he realized I couldn't pick cotton. Look at these hands. I was bleeding on the cotton. Can't sell cotton that ain't white. Nope. Couldn't pick my load. I was just not built for it. But I knew my way around wood. Yes, indeed. I could fall a tree, turn that tree into furniture, turn that tree into shingles, turn that tree into a building. So he put me to work doing lumbering and carpentry. He also put me to work fiddling. Oh, yeah. Once he found out I could fiddle, he had me play at all the parties. I thought I was saved. I said, this fiddle saved me. Yep, fiddle all night. Didn't think I'd have to work all morning. Didn't think he'd have me up at the crack of dawn, deprive me of my sleep, playing the fiddle at night. Didn't stop me from my chores during the day. But I say, I'll save those stories for the movies. I'll save those stories for my book. As you can see, I'm here in Saratoga now because I got out. Oh yeah, I got out. I hadn't realized I had been enslaved for 12 years. 12 years. No wife, no family, no word. No word from those I love. 12 years. I was working on some outbuildings behind the house. Of course, they had to Send a white man to supervise me. Couldn't trust no black man doing that kind of work, no matter how skilled I was. So they sent the village idiot. Well, they deemed him the village idiot, man by the name of Sam Bass. He was a Canadian in Louisiana. Or maybe he was the village idiot. But Sam Bass, he espoused abolition. He would speak out front and openly about abolishing slavery. About slavery wasn't right. And everyone for miles around thought he was crazy. They'd make fun of him. They'd invite him to parties. They thought of him as a fool. Well, I began to think that way too. Because sure enough, we were building these outhouses, chicken coops together. And I mean together. Hammer and nails, he'd blow for blow. Every blow I took, he took. Cutting wood, sawing away, every strike I make, he'd make. He'd working right next to me, talking to me. I was a little hesitant to talk to him, because I didn't know where he was coming from. I ain't never seen a white man like that. Or I should say, heard a white man talk like he did. But I began to loosen up. He was a mighty friendly fellow. And told me he was in Canada. I was like, oh, I've been to Montreal. You've been to Montreal? You've been North Platte? I let it out the bag. Yeah. I've been north. I'm from the north. Well, he was delighted. Foolishly, I began to entertain thoughts of maybe getting word to my people, getting word to those I loved and cared about, that maybe he'd post a letter for me. I remember the last time that happened. It almost got me killed. Oh, what kind of life was this? What kind of life was this? I almost rather risk death. I did risk death because I asked him. I said, Mr. Bass, would you post a letter for me? And he said, Platt, I'll do you one better. I'll write it. That way, your hand wouldn't have touched this. I took hope. And I dictated a letter that he put to paper. And he told me he mailed it, that he posted it. Now, you think the mail is slow today. Back in 1850, it was real slow. And every day, I'd look at Mr. Bass, wondering, did he post that letter? Did you post that letter? Or you about to turn me in? I didn't say this out loud, but I was thinking it. I didn't know what to do. Whew. I didn't know what to do. Till one day, there was a ruckus at the big house. Oh, yeah. All them white folks up there was getting stirred up. And they started coming down the hill to where me and Mr. Bass were. Oh. Actually, Mr. Bass kind of disappeared. Just me. Yep. And folks was getting closer and closer. They stirred up some dust coming my way. And I was frightfully afraid. I was so afraid. But I saw a big man leading the group. I knew that man. It was Henry B. Northup. Henry B. Now, Henry B. Northup was the white Northups. I told you earlier that Captain Northup had freed my father. Well, Captain Northup had family. He had family all in Washington County. And actually, that's where my father died and was buried. Yep, up in Sandy Hill, just across the river from Saratoga Springs. Oh, that's how I knew about Saratoga. Because folks in Sandy Hill, they said, you want to make some money, you got some talent, you go to Saratoga. And I did. I took my new wife. That's how I got introduced to Saratoga. But yeah, here's Henry B. I was so glad to see him. I couldn't believe it. Now, Henry B. is only 2 years older than me, so he always took to me. When we was kids, we'd go fishing, hunt squirrels together. Yep, Henry B. I threw myself at him. And he embraced me. He embraced me and said, Saul, he always called me that. He said, you're going home right now. And we did. Yeah, we left right then and there. Yep, I know Tibbetts was upset. I know he was mad. He paid good money for me. And I was a free man. I was regaining my freedom. On the train ride and stagecoach rides home, old Henry B. tried to update me what was happening, what I had missed out on. He said, yeah, Ann and the kids, they were waiting for me in Glens Falls. Oh man, I couldn't wait to see him. And he told me about this book that was changing the nation. This preacher's daughter, Harriet Beecher Stowe, wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. He said the nation was going crazy. Everybody was becoming abolitionist because of this book. He suggested I should write a book. He said, you've been in the lion's mouth. You should write a book. I had no book writer. Said, give me an axe and a saw and a hammer and some nails. You know, that's where my art comes from. But no, Henry B. kept talking it till we got home. Oh man, and I gotta tell you, my wife Ann, she's a beautiful woman. You know, she had all the elements of that. What can I say that? You know, she was a beautiful woman. And such a good cook that all the hotels were vying for her employee. Yeah, they all wanted her. But my kids, oh, my children. Well, Elizabeth, my oldest, she had gotten married. I wasn't there to walk her down the aisle. And Alonzo, my pride and joy, my little boy, I couldn't wait to hug him. But he wasn't a little boy no more. No, he's 18 years old. 18 years old, he's a man. And he was deemed unemployable. Unemployable, my son? How's that possible? Well, there was no one there to teach him how to handle a team of horses. I wasn't there to show him how to swing an axe, fall a tree, and bang some nails, and make a house, make furniture. Wasn't there to show him how to plow up the land and plant seed, harvest that seed. unemployable. My son. And Anne, my wife, still beautiful as ever. Anne kept those kids together. Yeah, she kept those kids together, kept them clothed, kept them educated, kept them fed. She did it all without me. Without me. Didn't take her but a couple of months to realize she didn't need me. Yeah, we don't live as man and wife anymore. No. I did write that book with the help of a friend of Henry B's who worked at Union College. Yeah, I did write that book and actually did quite well with it. It was second only to Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. Yeah, it was a bestseller. I used that money and bought Ann and the kids a house, even though I didn't dwell in it. I know this tale of mine was supposed to have a happy ending. I mean, I did regain my freedom, and Lord knows I'm happy about that. But what had happened to not just me, but to us in the interim was just heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. And all for chasing a few coins. I'm sorry. I don't mean to bring anybody to any lows here. And I don't know if there's a way to enliven this conversation. I'd be glad to entertain any questions anyone might have about my adventures and my sorrows and my heartaches being enslaved. I don't think I'm gonna go back to Saratoga. I think I'm going over to Vermont. You know, Vermont came in as a territory, and they don't allow any slaves there. Vermont is a stop on the Underground Railroad. And I pray for forgiveness for not having been involved in it earlier, prior to my falling into slavery. Maybe that was the lesson I was to learn, that I am my brother's keeper. Again, I apologize for bringing this heavy subject to bear on your ears. Oh, how did I learn? Had I not learned to play the fiddle, I think things would have been worse for me. But as a youngster, I played. Trying to remember, did I play before going to school? For some reason, I think I did. But it seems like this fiddle had always been a part of my life. I say me and my brother, we were often the only Black children in a classroom. And oh yeah, they called us names and teased us. But I think it would have been a lot worse if I didn't make music for them. Oh, they like that fiddle music. They like a good party. Everybody does. I even brought some songs back up from the South. Yep, and well, there was no music schools when I was a kid. I learned through people. Yeah, everybody knew somebody who played music. And I don't know why the fiddle, somebody always had a fiddle. Yep, and I learned from black and white alike.
Solomon, one of the questions that we have is, did you go to school in Minerva? And one of the other questions that we have is, where is the farm you worked on?
No, I didn't go to school in Minerva. Actually, I left Minerva quite young. Oh, I started school in Sandy Hill. And I believe that school is still standing. Now, Sandy Hill is not called Sandy Hill anymore. It's Hudson Falls. I say time has certainly been changing. Everything is changing so fast. Yeah, my children, they all moved away. Yeah, Alonzo moved his, I talked bad about Alonzo saying that he was unemployable, and he was. I got nobody to blame for that but myself. But Alonzo tried to redeem himself. He was a good boy, a good man. He joined the war effort. Yep, he became part of the Massachusetts 54th. Yep, served right alongside of Frederick Douglass's boys. Yep, I can't help but feel proud about that. Margaret and Ann? Well, I say Ann stayed in the area, took in sewing to her skills. I mean, she was already a great cook. My daughter, Margaret, Elizabeth, I say, got married one of the Stanton boys. Yeah, the Stantons, they're from Washington County too. Margaret ended up moving west, Ohio. Yeah, but a lot of my family's in the South though, Maryland. A lot of my families now came out of Alonzo. Yeah, Alonzo had lots of children, and his children have had children. Yeah, I don't have any descendants in this area. No, I think we all moved out. I say I've been spending a lot of time in Vermont, the good Reverend there. He's doing good work, helping people regain their freedom or get their freedom. Yeah, see what's unique about on the other side of the river is that you don't have to go far to hit Lake Champlain. And at the top of Lake Champlain is Canada. Freedom. Yeah, freedom.
Solomon, talking about freedom, can you talk a little bit about the Underground Railroad in this area and in our general region?
Well, not much is known about the Underground Railroad, only because it was a secret society. It wasn't the kind of club you could join and brag about. No, Underground Railroad, even though they were doing good work, helping colored folks, helping Black people get free. But white folks saw it as, you are depriving a man of his property. And property that's more valuable than a cow, if not as valuable as a horse. You're depriving a man of his property, and the government saw that too. And if you were to help somebody if you were to help somebody escape slavery, well, you're putting yourself in jeopardy. You're opening yourself up to 7 years in imprisonment. And this is a time in America where there's no social security. There's no welfare. So while you're doing your good deeds helping me, people like me, you're putting your family in jeopardy. You're putting your livelihood in jeopardy. You got no reward. Now, I will say in this area, actually not far from Saratoga Springs itself, is Quaker Springs. And the Quakers, you know, they were the big soldiers in helping Black people gain freedom. The Quakers have their own society, and it's pretty secret too. Yeah, not much is known about the Underground Railroad in this area. Now I have to tell you, prior to my enslavement, I didn't know about the Underground Railroad. I mean, I knew there was such a thing. People talked about it. It was like some great legend, some good stories. But I didn't have nothing to do with it. I figured it wasn't none of my business. You know, I'd walk in the streets of Saratoga, going into the fancy hotels, I would see lots of slaves. I'd give them a tip of my hat, a howdy do. Felt sorry for the brothers, but what could I do? There was nothing I could do, or so I thought then. No, I didn't know about the Underground Railroad until I got out. Henry B. knew more about it than me. He sure did. And actually, Henry B., when I think about him coming to save me, it was, had to be 1853. And at that time, there was another white man making a big name for himself in the nation. His name was John Brown. He's a New Yorker too. Even though he came from Connecticut, John Brown was making a name for himself shooting slaveholders. Yeah, he was killing them. John Brown was the fear of the South. So any Yankee who stepped foot in the South after 1850 put himself in jeopardy. People thought John Brown was everywhere. Anybody that had a Yankee accent might have been John Brown. Didn't stop Henry B. from coming to get me, though. No, he certainly did.
Solomon.
You know, I made a lot of friends with slaves during my time in slavitude, if there's such a word. But no, it didn't seem right for me to take up with some other woman. I had a woman. I had a woman and 3 kids, and I missed them terrible. I wanted to get back to them. I was a slave for 12 years. But for those 12 years, I had hope. I had a place I wanted to get to. You know, those other slaves, they had nowhere to go. I had a place to go to. I had a home. And I just had to figure a way to get there. None of these modern conveniences, even what we're doing now, me talking to this box, you watching me through this box, that didn't exist then. No, it didn't exist. I just had memory. And I have to tell you, for 12 years, every night for those 12 years, I would go back on the day. What did I do? How did I get in this situation? How can I get out of this situation?
Solomon, some people are also asking about your family And did you have any siblings, other people that would have
I had
missed
a
you?
brother. My brother. I had a brother. He didn't learn to play the fiddle. No, he was the little brother. I did everything. I got blamed for everything. And you know, when I think of a big brother, Henry B was like my big brother. Oh yeah, he was older than me. He would take me and my little brother around. He would take all of his cousins around. You know, our families were so entwined. It's why my father, he adopted the name Northup. He always said Captain Northup was a good man. He had big respect for Captain Northup, even though he was his slave. He thought highly of Captain Northup. And when the captain died, my father went out of his way to be around other Northups. And they, I believe, went out of their way to make sure that we were employed, told us about benefits of citizenship, like free education, that we took advantage of. My father insisted on it, that we go to school. Just like he insisted I learn to play that fiddle. Yeah, I never resigned to being a slave. No, I never gave up hope about getting home. I knew I was going to get home. Whether I was going to get there by walking or transportation or in a pine box, I was getting home.
And Solomon, as you learned more, obviously, coming back from being a slave, did you travel with Frederick Douglass? Did you know about him? What is your understanding of that?
Yes, I did travel with Frederick Douglass. Actually, for a while there, I became the darling of the abolitionists. Yeah, they took me around on a speaking tour. I got to admit, my head got kind of fat. I wrote this book that ended up being a bestseller, met Frederick Douglass and other distinguished gentlemen. I thought so much of myself for a while. I wrote a play and acted in my own play. Yep. Yeah, I don't think life was all glamour when I got back, because I did lose my wife. And it was thoughts of her and my children that kept me going, that made me realize I had something to live for. There were so many times I could have died. There were so many times I should have died. No, they kept me going. And I say, when I got back, Lonzo wasn't 6. Elizabeth wasn't 12. No, my kids had all grown into fine human beings. And I missed it. I lost out on their growth, their life. Yeah.
So I don't want to make this heavy, but I do have a few people who have asked, when did you pass?
Pass?
I know, you're right here with me.
Right, I ain't passed. What passed is, well, I guess life has passed me by. 1862, I was in the newspaper in 1862. It was in Vermont, of course. I found a life in Vermont. So trying to make up to my brothers and sisters. And what I mean by brothers and sisters, other Black people. Things that I should have done for them when I was free. I think I had a chance to make up for that with the good Reverend in Vermont. But no, I haven't passed. I don't expect to pass. I expect to live on and keep up the good work. Yeah, no, I haven't passed. You know, my book, 12 Years a Slave, is still being sold. It's still in print. Yeah, it's still in print. And well, I think Frederick Douglass's books are still in print, but not many other abolitionists can they say their book is still in print. I don't think Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin is still in print. So yeah, I have not passed, and I don't expect to pass. And I say there was a sighting. Somebody in 1862 wrote a sighting of me in Vermont. Well, if you're in Saratoga tonight, you probably haven't. Well, those of you who are on this Zoom, I think it's called, you got a sighting of me, so you can write your newspapers and say, yep, Solomon Northup is still around. Mm-hmm.
And Solomon, where would they have had a sighting of you in Saratoga Springs? Where did you live?
Where did I live in Saratoga? Well, I lived in the hotel. Actually, yeah, I lived, what was that hotel? Elizabeth and I, and well, Ann, me and Ann, we lived. Elizabeth was a little girl because she was in that room. Let me see, was Margaret born then? I can't, yeah, I think she was. She might have been born then. Alonzo definitely wasn't. No, he was a way little chap when I left. He was, I say, 6 years old. But yeah, no, tonight, I don't know where I'm gonna rest my head tonight. But I see somebody told me that the United States Hotel is no longer there, that the Grand Union's not there either. The Adelphi's still there. Maybe I'll go get me see if they got a servant's room there. Yeah. I am here to tell that original copy of my books in the Brookside Museum. That's in Schenectady. But I got to think all throughout this area, and I'd be shocked if the Saratoga Library doesn't have a first edition copy of my book. I say it kind of went every which way, certainly in this area. But yeah, you could maybe even catch me wandering the streets, even though it's a mite chilly tonight. And I smell snow coming. So I definitely better find me a place to stay. Maybe Ann will even put me up. But I have to cross the river for that. Yeah, I'd be glad to entertain any questions you might have. Yeah, just to lighten the mood a bit. Perhaps you'd like to hear a tune. Yeah?
Sure, we'd love to hear a tune, and definitely go see our friends over at the Brookside Museum in Ballston Spa. We would love to see that book.
Well, the book it's my autobiography. I dictated that book, even though you'll see, I believe his name was David Wilson, it's like the author. He was from Schenectady. Gave me a hard time about some of the passages I wanted to put in that book. I wanted to put in that book that I invented a fish trap. He wanted to leave it out. But you know, that fish trap saved my life. Yep, it saved my life. It fed me. It gave me food like crazy. I wouldn't be the size I am today if it wasn't for that fish trap. Because you know, a slave in the South gets an allotment of 5 pounds of cornmeal, a pound of lard, and that's got to last a month. Yeah, that wasn't going to do for me. Yep, and you can't, I mean, you can grow some stuff in the little yard they give you, but you ain't getting much. And if you get anything, Other slaves are liable to steal it. If anything comes up, they usually grab it before it gets ripe. But yeah, I put together a little fish trap, little Yankee ingenuity. You know, we Yankees, we special people. These four seasons got us hustling and working all the time. You can get a little lazy in the South, not having to deal with winter, not like we deal with winter. I swear it must be 20 degrees out there tonight. They don't see that. No, never.
All right. Well, it seems like everybody has asked the questions that they wanted to. And so I just wanted to say, Solomon, thank you so much for joining us. Your story was overwhelming to listen to, and we were just so pleased to have you here tonight. So thank you.
Well, you're more than welcome. It was a pleasure talking with you all. I kind of hogged the conversation. Sorry about that. But I hadn't spoken freely in so long. I just had to let it all out. So good night and sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And definitely keep an eye on our website so that you can stay up to date on future programs and our historic homes tour that's coming up in May, and our porch party that we mentioned earlier, that's in June. We have lots of educational programs coming on, and everyone who is in attendance tonight will receive a link to this recording in your inbox sometime next week. So again, if you're not a member, please join with your membership. That's what supports programs like this and can bring amazing speakers, presenters, and now we can add reenactors to our list. So I also want to say thank you so much to Cliff and his beautiful retelling of Solomon's story. It was overwhelming, and I am so thrilled that we could bring this to you tonight. But thank you all so much for joining. And if anybody has any questions in the future, feel free to contact us at the foundation. And again, our website is www.saratogapreservation.org. Thank you. Good night.